What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to, a modern day Renaissance man. He is a medicine man. He's an actor, a stunt person, also, like the major domo of an amazing short film that a clip is all around the interwebs. Hula Hoop Boy. He's the one, the only, Joshua Mesnik. Josh, what's going on?
What's happening, man? Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Pleasure is all mine. And so I guess a good hearty shout out goes out to our good friend, pro wrestler Zeta Zhang,
Yep.
also an actress, like a Renaissance woman, actress, singer, all the stuffs, wrestler, kick ass person. But we met, of all places, this sounds so LA, but at a beach house in Malibu when
Yep.
she had a shindig.
Yep. Wine and cheese and superheroes and deep philosophical conversations. It was full moon.
Yes, you noticed it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
A beautiful night. Yeah. It was very LA. Very LA.
very LA. Which I've been here since '95, so like we came when I was like fifth grade-ish and what have you. I actually kind of steer away from those like things, like the red carpet, velvet ropey thingies or whatever. But like, it's funny because like Zeta is the puller together of the peoples. Like when I'm with her, even like her dude, Alex, he's amazing, but she's the puller together of like all of these like amazing hodgepodge of people. So like when you're there, it might not be you, but like this could be cool because she does the things.
Yeah, I moved out here in 5 years ago, 2017. And at first it was like yes to everything, go to all the things. And sort of burnt out from that. And now it's sort of like, all right, if someone invites me and they're really cool, they have good energy, the people whatever they're involved with, I resonate with it. There's just that kind of that click, then I'll go to the LA thing that they invite me to. But other than that, I kind of keep it low key. I live up in La Crescenta. I have a little 1-bedroom house here that I'm renting out, and it's like totally just tucked in the woods, So I definitely am valuing space from the craziness, space from the hive.
And for those watching, which by the way, Micmac, our resident shit stirrer from down under, says hi.
Lost your audio. There you go. Oh.
Wow. I should do this. How about that?
That's so weird.
Yeah. No. There's a loose wire that I've got going, and it pesters me. The last couple podcasts that I've done, it's just like weird. It's so weird.
I got it now.
Yeah. No, but for anybody that doesn't know the logistics of LA, like you're literally up above Hollywood, like literally above the Hollywood sign where La Crescenta is, locking me out of Flint Ridge area and what have you. You're right above Hollywood. So, I think that's a bit of a metaphor, right? Like you just stay above the fray a little bit, huh?
Well, they call it the balcony of LA. So you're kind of situated up there. And I guess, it is like a metaphor. Keeping above the clouds, so to speak, some of the fog, the grayness, the clutter, the activity, the buzz, all of those things. It does feel like this is a reflection of how I want to experience at least part of my life, having distance from that. But, then I get the option to go in, dive in, jump into the fray. And that's the privilege of living here, is I get to have the choice instead of always living in the chaos. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Now, so you moved out here 5 years ago. So, I guess what brought you, like, I guess, how did you become? Were you, acting and doing stunt work elsewhere, or is it just something that kind of hit you and you're like, oh, LA is the place? Like what is your origin story?
Yeah, I love it. Well, first, I mean, the film that you mentioned in the beginning of our podcast, Hula Hoop Boy, that's a story about a film that I made in high school. So I've been making films, doing weird stuff, silly, crazy action comedies, filming stuff with my friends for as long as I can remember. And it was always just in my mind, a hobby, something I was doing for fun. And as you know, you could probably trace back a lot of origin stories of people in Hollywood. There's this shift moment of when did this hobby turn into something that I either like realized could be something I could do with my life, as a career, or something that I just got an opportunity and just, kind of stumbled into it. And for me, I actually kind of cut my teeth with public speaking in high schools. I used to be a high school teacher. I used to work actually, I still do work with this nonprofit, but not full time. But I lived in New York City, and I was a teacher. I trained teachers, and I worked with an educational program called the Question Project. And we had classes in a few schools in the Bronx, and I would go in and I would, share basically create safe spaces with students to explore big questions in life. We would have dialogue. And it would involve a lot of, trying to, get inspiration, get energy moving in the room, get people to talk, share something that is on your mind, express yourself. And it was very challenging. And I remember, and I was training as an actor at the time, but just because I loved acting, it wasn't really something I was trying to do. I've just always, loved being a part of a scene or creating something with my body, or making something happen. And there was just this kind of moment where I sort of realized that I sort of had a split. I was trying to express my creativity through my career, and I was doing it in a way that was authentic but was partial. It was partial. It was I could feel part of myself alive. And, over time, and this was 2015, 2016, I was working out there full time. And then there was just this shift. Actually, my grandmother was a big part of this shift. And she I had a phone call with her, and she gave me kind of like permission. She is one of my best friends, mentor, guide, someone who I look up to. And, I value when she kind of drops the wisdom, and yeah, there was just this phone call, and she's like, she could just sense in me I was a little unfulfilled, which was strange because I was literally living a dream job. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do, but I was unfulfilled. And so she said, it's okay for you to just fly, to just go, and to just drop it all and to see what happens. And, you would think someone who grew up in a time where there's the depression and the wars, and, there's a mindset of like, be conservative and like, build that career, and, but she didn't express that to me. And that gave me permission to reflect and think, what am I doing with my life? What do I want to do? And it was actually beautiful as I reflect, because the program's called the Question Project, and it's all about going on a quest, going on a journey. And we explore these pillars of life: choice, purpose, fearlessness, interconnectedness, the bigger picture. And we take students on that journey through these, aspects of the human experience. And I started experiencing myself going on that quest internally, really, prominently, as I was trying to make this choice. So that's kind of like, that's the shift moment for me. And I had a friend call me. I went to Florida State University, and I among other things, we have a comedy show out there. And I was in a comedy troupe, and so I was performing with them in college. And one of my best friends in that group, they called me and they said, "Hey man, we got a house in LA, and we have one room. And what do you think? You want to move out here?" And so that was like conjunct with the phone call I had with my grandmother, and it all just sort of made sense. And I got that click, and I got that yes. So, fast forward a few months, it was a hard choice, but I decided to bow out of the commitment with the organization, sell a lot of stuff, get a car, move from Florida, where I'm from, and drive to LA and start a new life there.
Now, I mean, obviously, that's amazing. And your grandmother seems to be this amazing catalyst. You're almost like a spirit guide, but in this existence, for you, the pillar. And her almost give was it like weighing heavy on your mind that you kind of felt the feeling of unfulfillment and not like having that heaviness and going like, oh, what does grandma think? Like she's one of the most important people in my life, like whatever. And when she tells you on her own, like go ahead and fly, like were you experiencing a little bit of turmoil before she gave you kind of that okay?
Big time. Partially because like I was saying, this job that I had that was my full-time job was a passion. Like I had helped with the founders of the program. We co-written it, co-created it, you know, literally made it from scratch. It was our baby. You know, it was something that lived in us and something that we nurtured to life. And so, you know, imagine it's not like just like working for a corporation that you had no agency in creating. It's like working for something that you nurtured, you know, to where it is. And so there was a loving obligation to that. And so that was the biggest challenge for me, was like, it was like, I didn't want to abandon it. And I think I lost your visual, but I'm assuming you're still
no,
there.
no, no.
Oh.
I mean, I kind of wanted the focus to be on you.
Oh, I love it. Hey, that's
yeah.
fine. I'll just look at myself. Yes, yes. Yeah. I'm in a mirror now. So yeah, so the you know, that loving obligation to something that you've created, that's really was the main, you know, hook. It wasn't a bad hook. It was just part of that what made the choice so hard for me. And my grandma, you know, she's someone who's really dedicated. You know, she was the kind of person that was going to city council. She was the kind of person who was like standing up and speaking for things that she felt was important in her community in Naples, Florida, small beach town where I grew up. And, you know, someone who really spins and, you know, dedicates herself to things outside of herself. So you know, for her, I would imagine her kind of like really pushing me to like live a life of service. But when I got that, you know, kind of this other side, which was like, live a life that your heart calls you to live, you know, live a life that is in alignment with what you really want in this life. And don't hold back out of obligation. Don't think that you need to be doing something, you know, really, you know, explore and have a quest in yourself of what am I obligated to and why. Some obligations are necessary. Some are in alignment, and, you know, some feel good, and others, you know, have maybe expired. And so, you know, that I think a lot of factors were playing, but that was kind of the biggest factor to me, is I didn't want to abandon this thing that I loved so much.
Right. And also there's a bit of paradox, right? Because you're teaching these young minds of, it's a question project. And you know, to not know too much of the organization, just right there, it kind of grabs you in terms of their mission statement and their name, right? And you're kind of inspiring people to question things or go a little bit further with their thinking and their spirit and what have
Yes.
you. But also you're like, this is the place for me, a dream job in your own words. And still there's still something festering that you gotta admit to the world. You know, it's stirring in you, you know, this surge of creativity that is unfulfilled. And then this call happens from your friends and you're like, hey, we got a spot in LA, you want it?
And then the story, you know, kind of begins, right? That's sort of, and of course life is this amazing like kind of fold of like multiple kind of story structures all built on top of each other, and you have these recurring characters, and then you have these resets and these, you know, these parts of your life that you completely forget or leave behind. But for me, you know, there was definitely a story, you know, that had begun when I started working with the Question Project, and that story kind of ended, and then it you know, allowed me to make a choice and begin a new story here in LA, and pursuing, you know, a career as an actor, really as a filmmaker, a creator. That's what I want, you know. And the journey to that destination included, in the beginning, like I was saying, kind of saying yes to everything and really exploring what do I want? What am I doing? What, you know, who am I? How do I express myself? What kind of people am I attracted to? You know, what's my avenues, you know, the skill sets that I want to develop and build to become this version of myself that I'm sort of like getting previews of. What are the skill sets and the avenues that I am attracted to that'll be enjoyable to build out, you know, and trying to find those, you know, and I've always kind of swam against the stream, and I've always sort of like been turned off by things that everyone else does, for better or worse. So, you know, it was a little bit more of an alternative. I explored a lot of alternative routes, and I still do. And I think we all find our way. And I think I've found a nice way, a nice stride, something that works for me. Teachers, mentors, groups, tribe, community, you know, things that are in alignment with me that I can show up and say yes for, you know, and not question whether or not, although I always do question, but I'm questioning less, which I think is a good sign, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those duality things, you know, at which, you know, it's crazy. Like, you know, again, these three things, like this thing in your heart to do, right? Your grandma saying, no, go ahead and spread your wings. And then this place opens up. And I just think about people who live their lives and, you know, they're waiting for a sign, so to speak, and quite literally in some cases, and they will shut it off, you know, and, you know, the zig versus zag, you know, and they never awaken to whatever that thing in their life was calling them to do, and will end up bitter and malingered and just angry at the world because they didn't listen to that, and still searching for the whatever when it was right there in your face, and you just like, nope, I'm not gonna do that right now, or it'll make me look like something or other.
It's a really, what you're touching on is a very, it's such a core theme. It's shared by so many millions of people, I believe. And I was actually just talking about this last night with a good friend of mine, and we're just trying to like touch this experience where, if on an extreme, it's someone who repeats the same day, same pattern, dedicated, but also once they have free time, numb it out. Drugs, alcohol, sports, TV, sit down, go away, check out. Now, so what, you know, what's the like, what's that little sensitive space where the human has, you know, the time where they've left their job and they're home and now they have freedom, but in that time of freedom, for whatever reason, they just can't handle it and they just got to go and numb out. What is being revealed, or, you know, what is there to be looked at and to be with in that space after the job? And it, for me, I'm just like imagining myself, well, if I'm really not connected to what I'm doing, or if this little obligation has run out and that contract, so to speak, has expired, something in me is trying to tell me, you know, or it's screaming for a voice so that it can express, well, why don't we go here? Why don't we go there? Why don't we change this scene? Why don't we change the story and start something new? And I think sometimes that invitation for change is scary. It creates a little bit of stress because that change doesn't just mean, you know, a new scenery. It also means sacrifice. It also means abandoning something you love. It also means changing your relationships, changing your income, changing these things that make you feel comfortable. And, you know, that's sort of like, I think why, you know, living this life where you're kind of on the seat of your pants, you know, always like ready for that next shift, that next change. It does take practice because it's not comfortable. And there's some skill sets that need to be developed so you can hear that voice,
Right.
that says the time is up for this. The time is up for this job, this relationship, this pattern, whatever it is. It's a skill I think humans can learn. You know, we all have the ability to listen and, you know, develop an ear for inner guidance, I think.
Which, I mean, have you always had that attribute in your personality and spirit where you would just like, okay, you know, where your ear was always developed, or did it take time? Because again, it's when you look at the landscape of, you know, human condition, right? We have all of these social media and tech something or others and whatever, but we never felt more disconnected, more depressed, and what have you. And I'm speaking specifically North America, right? Because there's other plights in other parts of the world, you know, but that specifically, you know, we have times where we're questioning our leaders, which I think is healthy, you know, but we're like, where are we going? You know, if my life and my life condition is here, and they're on a different plane. Are they really our leader anymore? And can they do what I'm doing right now? Could they live the life that I'm living right now? And the strife, moreover, and people are questioning ethics. That's why, you're seeing people who retired 10 years ago getting back into the workforce just because what they thought. And there's a multitude of different things. Sometimes retirement isn't fulfilling when you're nose to the grindstone, dirt and under your fingernails or what have you. But also, like, maybe I can't afford to live on retirement and I need to go back, So it's a multitude of different things where we're questioning everything that we knew to be true even 5 or 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. And now it's time to shake it up.
Yes, it's a time of change. I think we can all see the rapid, shifting. It's always, change has always been on there. I think, life is change, and we get to pick it up and see it more through, I think, our communication technology, the ability for us to see how other people's lives are changing so fast. We don't only have ourselves in our immediate circles as a reference. But aside from like a cynic's view, which would be easy for me to take because I think cynicism is popular. It's easy to look at optimism and be like, yeah, change. That's what they've all said. The hippies said it in the 60s and the hippies say it now. And so fair enough. Maybe we're not all dancing on golden rainbows and, exchanging roses as a form of currency yet.
If only, damn.
Maybe we haven't shed these mortal coils and become pure energy yet. But, I think our society is learning more rapidly. Like we have like this second brain developing where our collective, where it was normally preserved through stories and writing, our collective is now becoming more solidified and preserved through digital technology to be accessible at a blink of an eye. And so you have this like secondary layer of consciousness and almost a brain that's like solidifying that can support us in like learning about ourselves. And like now we can see a pattern repeat every 10 years, and that pattern that repeats every 10 years, we might not have caught it, 1,000 years ago because it would have been lost in the wind with all the other chaos of life. But now we can like track our society and we can be like, wow, it took 10 years for this to happen. We've watched 30 years out, 40 years out. We can now observe and, reflect and correct. And so I have optimism, as we talk about this collective, I have optimism because I think we're very adaptable. And I think some of the grace of what we've created for ourselves technologically and otherwise gives us the tools to make change. Yeah.
No, I like it. Optimist versus pessimist, which, and you find yourself in surroundings, right? You had been to, it grew up in Naples, Florida, ended up in New York, and then here you find yourself in LA. And LA, if you're not, I guess, solidified in yourself and your understanding of who you are. And sometimes you obviously you gain understanding and what have you, but it can be a place where you can almost move with the winds of change and kind of alter your views, right? And your principles for whatever you think is, I don't know, the proverbial, brass ring or, the carrot on the rope and what have you, the dangling carrot. People about it. Yeah, absolutely. So, like, how did you adapt to being in LA? Which is completely different than either of the places that you've been before.
I think community and mentorship are the two kind of pillars that keep me grounded. And of course, getting outside, ocean, hiking trails, all that kind of stuff, just to connect me to earth. But I think having a strong community, like I moved out here with a group of people that I went to college with that I had a relationship with, and I had done my best to kind of search my network to make sure I knew everyone who was out here that I had a connection with and reached out to them. So I really tried to develop a social network, and I envision it like a root system. And it's sort of like, you're a little tree, but then you kind of reach out and you start to learn who's around you. And then you get to like, kind of ground together, because a lot of my friends who moved out here, we had just moved out here together. And so they're growing out their roots too. And there's something miraculous about trees, how not only are they able to support each other, like literally physically by, keeping the soil, compact and stable and alive, but they also support each other through sharing information and minerals and water. There's a root system that's intelligent between trees, and we could get into that, but it's miraculous. And I think humans, as we are a metaphor and an expression of life, we share these qualities like trees do. And so like, having trees around me that I was in contact with, that we kind of intentionally were trying to develop stability together, that helped a lot. And, unlike a tree, I could go in a variety of ways, not just upward. I could grow downward. I could grow sideways. I could, fly. I could evaporate. There's a lot of things I could do as a creative being. So then to have direction, to have stability, to have kind of, to try to develop my true north and then walk towards it, that happens through mentorship, I believe. That happens through getting guidance, getting someone who's walked the path before you and who can, and not just one person, but, people who have walked the path and can, save you a lot of time and energy. There's something about that, I reflect, like, it wasn't a norm for me. Like, like when I was in high school or whatever, like you didn't really have a mentor that you got linked up with that I could remember. I mean, I had a football coach, but that's different. It's not really built into my culture growing up to like find a mentor and follow them. In some cultures, there's gurus, there's guides, there's shamans, there's people who have walked the path and who guide the people, to follow. But in the West, it's sort of decentralized. We kind of do it on our own. We kind of blaze the trail, and that's awesome. But I do think it leads a lot of people to walk a long way and kind of realize that they've gone the wrong way. And now they got to backtrack and figure out what to do. And then they're 45 and they have a midlife crisis, and, now what? So, I'm trying to avoid that, which I might not be able to avoid because, I think life is a comedy as well as a drama and a lot of other things, an action film.
Yeah.
So life is probably holding all this over my head to knock my head over once I think I have it all figured out. But yeah, finding mentorship. One of my mentors, her name is Suzanne, and she's this woman who really I would just say lives the path of the heart. And how does that look? Well, love can be kind, love can be bold, love can be angry, love can be expressive, love can be, love is not always just what we see as love in the movies, or what we know as love by a great definition of love I've heard recently is reciprocal opening. Reciprocal opening. This is with John Vervaeke. He's kind of a philosopher, Neoplatonist kind of stuff that he gets into. But he expressed love as reciprocal opening, which I really resonate with. And, you imagine these two, beings, one offers something that, improves or nurtures the other then opens through that gift. Then in that opening, they express something back, either through a choice or just because now that they're an open flower, now they have a new scent, some pollen, they're now sharing. And then that gets transferred to the other person, and now they open, and then it's a dance and a journey. So love can look like that. And so anyway, Suzanne is a lover. And when I think about what's my true north in Hollywood, well, if I stray far away from love, I don't know if I'm going in the right direction, and I don't know if it's going to be worth it in the end when I'm an old man, and yeah, I've made all my stuff, I had a good time, I made money, but was my life aligned with my highest expression? as a fully lit, fully awake, fully happy, loving being. You know, that's really what I'm going to think about. What were my opportunities to live like that? Did I take them or not? So when I reflect, you know, how do I keep grounded in LA? You know, I really try to keep it as truly as grounded as possible, and then create from there, and then go on these big adventures, go to these conferences, go to the, you know, go to the film festivals, you know, go to the LA things, catch the vibe, you know, get lost. But then I'm anchored, you know, internally. And then I can get really lost, and I kind of get pulled back. And that's a practice. It's a practice.
No, I love it. And Alex Ramirez, a free thinker in his own right, it says, Joshua, you are the man. Yeah. But, you know, it's funny. So, like, kind of my own experience. My mom is from Fiji, the Fiji Islands, where there's, you know, it's communal. It's a village, right? Like, you know, you know everybody, you know, and you're held accountable. And then my dad from Midwest Indiana, and it's same thing where, you know, like if you got a, you know, bad grade in school or whatever, you're walking home and this neighbor, like, you know, has some words with you because their kid told, you know, and there's this kind of accountability that happens within a communal setting, right? Even further, my mom, actually both my parents, brought my sister and I up as Nichiren Buddhists, where the mentor disciple, you know, relationship is almost the centerpiece of the whole teachings, right? Like the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin and all that jazz, you know. But it's funny for me, and I grew up like all over the place. I kind of just scurry back to my hole, like, and it's funny because people are like, "Ah, you're so like free and whatever," but like I not to say I like the privacy, but it's just like I at this juncture of my life, not to say that I don't do the mentor disciple kind of relationship, but like I also kind of listen to the winds of change, right? If I see somebody doing something that might not be the, you know, fit into my principle, like I just don't do that, you know, and don't have a rubric, so to speak. But it's just like, okay, well, this is okay today, it isn't okay tomorrow. One crazy kind of example is growing up in Inglewood. When we came here to LA, Inglewood, like it was almost like lowbrow. If you smoke marijuana and whatever, you're going to be a loser, whatever. And then now, like the world is wide open, people are receptive to it and everything like that. I still get weirded out, you know, but who am, you know, and I almost feel like I'm kind of only one with it because everybody else is just like, oh, we're just smoking on the street, want a vape, whatever, like whatever. But like, who am I to kind of like bet up my own experiences against and then compare it to what is currently here? You know, like not that I crave the communal, but like I do wish like, hey, do some of my friends who were kind of accosted or, you know, got in trouble for, you know, marijuana possession or whatever, what would they think of nowadays? You know, how are they living their life? So I almost want to check in with the community, but also zap out.
Yeah. I love that. And sort of, it's this dance between kind of having your own set of whatever the values, the things that the guidance you follow in your life that sort of guides you, your principles, but also, like you said, being adaptive, being open, being flexible, you know, going with the winds of change and seeing maybe there's a place for you in that does fit with who you are. Maybe you'll change, you'll kind of adapt into that new,
right,
that new flow. But right, it's kind of both, you know. If we're too rigid, you know, rigidity, it leads to isolation, and isolation leads to death, you know.
Right. And also brittle. I mean, if you're rigid, you're brittle, you know.
Yes.
Easy to knock over, you know, susceptible to breaks,
Yes.
You know, and
if you're too fluid, you know, you don't have form, and then you don't really, you know, go anywhere. You kind of just go wherever you're going to go, and that's okay. But it might not be your plan. It might be someone else's plan. And then that's that, you know, and then deep down, there's probably a voice in you that says, but I really, really, really want to go that way. And in order to do that, I have to lift my feet up and go against the tide and go against the, you know, the current. And that takes form.
I love it. I mean, I love how open you are to, you know, I think what life and dare I say it, like the earth and the universe is trying to teach you. It's almost like you're a conduit of all of the things around you, and you're listening. You know, like I don't know why I'm thinking about it, but you know, like the colors of the wind from Pocahontas, which that's a whole different deal. But like when you think about, like, if you're old enough to remember that, or you've seen it on Disney Plus, you know, it's so beautiful, and you know the leaves and everything like just surround Pocahontas and what have you. And the reason why is because she was open to that. Now, obviously, it's a Disney version of a true story or what have you, but like that's almost where you're at, you know, or like a Moana type. And I don't know why I'm not the biggest Disney guy ever, but I'm bringing up Disney references because it makes sense in my head. But Moana, same deal. She was the chosen one, right? Yes. So I guess theoretically speaking, you're almost Pocahontas, Moana-like in terms of you're able to, you know, adapt to the world and what it's trying to teach you.
I love that. Thank you. That honestly is one of the sweetest compliments I've ever received. So thank you. Just to reflect, you know, it's a big teaching, the colors of the wind. You know, you're sourcing your information. Like, let's say you're listening for guidance and you're thinking that guidance is going to come from a person. All right. Now you're just only looking at people and their mouths and their sounds. And that's where you're going to get your information. If you expand, you say, oh, my guidance will come from information and God, whatever, spirit, you know. Okay. Now you're listening to people's mouths and you're sort of listening to that voice inside your head, or that voice, wherever that voice is. Okay, now you have 2 reference points. And then, oh, my guidance comes from nature and people and God. Oh, okay. So then when I go on a hike, oh, that hawk, it flew and sort of did this thing at the same moment that I had this thought. And oh, that's an interesting connection. Oh, maybe that thought's important. Or like, oh, wow, that snake. What's a symbol of a snake? That's interesting. I'll look that up at home. All right. So nature, people, God. Okay, well, where's the line between God and whatever? My car radio, you know, my, I don't know, my gardener, the leaf blower. Seriously, like, you know, guidance can come from anything. That's how I live. That's my Pocahontas moment.
Yeah.
You know, guidance can come as I'm just writing, and all of a sudden I just start writing something. I don't even know what I'm writing, but I just start writing something. For me, that's guidance. That's something else that's coming through me, right? And like I said, it'll come. I'm listening to the radio. I just, you know, or Spotify. Sorry, radio. Yeah. Who in their right mind is turning on the radio? No, just you know, Spotify. You know, it's something. A song will pop up, and you know, literally, the words that come through my speaker have something in them that feels important, and the timing of it, and just the context is synchronistic, and I receive that, right? And I try to let it influence me and like change my plans, you know, and I try to let these little hints, because like you can receive the guidance, but if it doesn't affect your actions, then you're not really receiving it. It's sort of coming halfway. And the way, for me, the practice or the way that you, I guess, engage with this feedback loop, this love, this reciprocal opening with the universe, is you have to be, you know, affected, then open up. And for me, opening up is making choices that are in response to that guidance, right? It's being influenced by the guidance. And then that act kind of goes out into the universe, and then the universe opens up more and then shares more. But if you don't engage in that reciprocal act, you might not experience the same flow of information. You might not experience that same conversation that you would if you're acting on the information, you know, and that for me is the dance. That's kind of the practice. And I think I know it's a lifelong practice.
Yeah. You know, because if you stop adapting, if you stop the dance, so to speak, right? I mean, it's almost like you're without life, right? Like you're turning off. You're and we've seen it in society, right? People who they're living in a very clinical way of looking at things. You know, they have a job, they might have a relationship, they have the car, the whatever, the stuff, but also they're living almost a life of less virtue or virtueless, a virtue-less life, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. They're in a way they're disconnected from this information, from the information that's self-sourced, that's other-sourced, that what we're talking about, this sort of web, this and because within that information is energy and is motivation. There is, because it's not just words or data. You know, that's what we think of when we think of information, is like data. That's how our brains like to kind of relate to that. But information, our DNA is information. It's literally code, you know.
Right.
The proteins that fuel, you know, the nucleotides, you know, all that stuff, the amino acids, all of that is information that locks in and creates these explosions that power our body. So information is like an energy source. It is energy. Energy is information. So, you know, I have compassion for people who are who are suffering because they're not connected to this flow of information for whatever reason. Sometimes it's literally just, you know, you grow up within a, you know, a framework where you are trained to not be connected to that. You're trained to only identify one source for your connection. Your parent, maybe it's a codependent relationship with your parent. So now your sourcing is sort of dependent, and now you're really closed off, because not only are you only looking for people to be your source, but you're looking for people to be your source in a specific way. And if they don't meet you in that way, you shut down, you close off, and you know that's a codependent relationship. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at is just like echoing your point. You know, there is suffering in that life where you're doing the day-to-day thing, but you're not really open to the larger picture that is trying to get to you. You know, that you know, I like to animate the universe. Like, I kind of like to imagine the universe is living, and it has intentionality there. Like, I kind of, my logic behind that is like, all right, I'm a person, I'm a human. If I can experience intention, if I can experience this, you know, this drive to want something for somebody, and if I know people in my life that have that same want for me, we're just very small drops and expressions of a larger universe. So if I can express that, how much of that is latent and potential within the entirety of existence? You know, I would say a whole lot. I think the universe has a lot of life that is coming through to us through people, but like I said, through everything else. And I guess it's just a matter of opening up to it, listening, and acting on it.
I love it. I love it. McMax says he actually prefers the radio, and he heard "Let It Be" the other day, and I hope that was a happy memory for you, a happy moment. Yeah, the Beatles, they invoke happiness out of people, right?
I will say, like, there is something though about turning on the radio, because it's like, even now, like, you still have to open up your app and get the Spotify and load it and make sure your Bluetooth works. First of all, there's something just about the pressing that clunky button and turning the dial, and you get the thing, you don't have to wait. And also the fidelity of it, that just that little bit of like that buzz, static, a little bit. I kind of like it. Yeah. It's kind of, it gets me in a certain way. Yeah. So I like, you know, I like that.
Yeah, which, I mean, for me, for whatever reason, like, it actually sounds better. The radio sounds better. The terrestrial radio sounds a little bit better than even my Spotify and what have you, or Amazon Music at different points of the day. So I'm all like, maybe I need to listen to more radio, like, you know. And it's a bit of nostalgia, right? You know, because that's not the way things are done necessarily now. Like, if you know, 15-year-old us versus a 15-year-old today, they're not listening to the radio. I mean, they barely know what a landline phone is, right? So, you know, but there's there's parts of us that, it invokes, like, even just the action of pressing that dial or changing from the commercial and finding a commercial on the other channel or what have you. It's supposed to be your kind of your safe key. But that's a bit of nostalgia that sometimes doesn't get, when you get to skip everything, skip every commercial, you pay the 10 extra bucks to have things the way that you like it, but it still takes time to load and what have you. And it's just a nice little microcosm of like getting back to center.
Yeah, it's tactile. Yeah,
yes,
you can feel it. Yeah. Something analog about it that keeps you. Yeah, it's kind of grounding. Yeah.
Which I gotta ask, right? So has there ever been a point where you basically sat down to pen something, whether they be your thoughts and idea for a potential project and what have you, like where you're in and you're locked in and you have a good conception of what you're going to do, but maybe the things that you see or the things that you feel kind of move you in a different direction?
Well, I mean, just talking about this film that I've written and we've made it, the process when I started writing Hula Hoop Boy, I thought it was going to kind of go this way where I would just sit down and just sort of channel it, or it would just come. It didn't that way. I had to show up kind of repetitively to that writing tape. It was my first experience of really having to like produce something. And I had a little bit of a time crunch because I was being advised by the New York Film Academy. It was a kind of an accelerator kind of program where they were helping us to develop this, whatever we were working on. And so I had a time crunch, which was really helpful, actually. Deadlines really help. And no, yeah, it wasn't, I kind of had to keep on kind of showing up to the computer, even if nothing came, just like try and then get feedback from other people. I actually had this experience where I was sitting out back on my little patio here, and I was kind of really deep in a thought, and I started feeling this kind of stream where I was like, oh, and the story started forming. And right as that started happening, this teenage mountain lion about, oh, you can't see it, but I don't know, about 3 feet long, not too big, but decent sized, medium sized little cat came up to the entrance of my patio and walked up, looked at me, made eye contact with me. And I'm just like standing there with my pen, like,
yeah.
And then like, after it sort of connected with me, it like came into my abode. It walked into my little space and started coming right up to my feet. And at that point, I actually got a little scared because I didn't know if it even, I didn't know what it was doing. I assumed that it was somehow thinking I wasn't there, or that it was like trying to dominate me or something. I didn't know. So I kind of made a noise. I was like, hey, something like that. And it ended up getting scared and going away. But, it's a moment like this where I was brought into like really intense present moment awareness.
Right.
And then dropping back into my writing after that happened, I had a few big ideas come that I don't think would have came without that. So I learned a little bit, like, it's good to have a little adrenaline going. It's good to kind of like stimulate and kind of open yourself up through music, through something that kind of gets you out of your mind a little bit. And then you can drop back into the story. But yeah, writing the film was a great experience, and I'm clamoring for another opportunity to write something.
So I guess the subject matter, right? Who like where does that come from?
Yeah, well, so the film's based on a film that I created in high school, and it's a thought experiment as to what would happen if this film that I made went crazy viral, like insanely viral. What would have happened? What would have happened in myself? What would have happened in my life? And so I sort of developed that idea outwards, and I take the audience kind of on this journey, and then I kind of launch the story from there. And to see, as a filmmaker, I'm trying to recreate this magical kind of thing that I did in high school. And, I've kind of fallen off, no one remembers me. I've been forgotten. How am I going to reclaim and have people remember me? you know, and the lesson of the story right now is that when you try too hard, if you're too rigid, you know, if you expect too much, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so he does, and he does fail. And now he's on a journey of, you know, discovering who he is, because in the aftermath of that failure is a lot of hurt people and a lot of mess that he now is responsible for. So he's on the run. And Hula Hoop Boy, yeah, Hula Hoop Boy is on the run. And so that's, you know, the larger story that I'm developing is his journey on the run, then rewilding, you know, reconnecting with himself and discovering, you know, this inner hero, out of a character that you would kind of see as being, you know, one dimensional. I mean, you know, he's a sort of egoic character. So you wouldn't expect him to find some nuggets of gold that I want him to find.
I think it's brilliant. Just kind of quick hits. Mick Mac says radio so random, plus other people are listening to the same song at the exact same time, 100%. And I got digital radio, perfect quality. That's nice. Amazing. Now, you have this concept that was first birthed in high school, right? You know, and obviously, as you mature, your thoughts and your experiences mature, right? So, what was that experience like? Taking something that was birthed out of high school, and then now you have, you know, the age that you are, and you have all of these different life experiences. You've moved from, you know, your homestead theoretically, and now you get to put all of these experiences back in. Like, did you have kind of that moment where you're like, oh man, I gotta, you know, this is Blink 182, their latest album. I think all three original members, they had the thought of like, what is the Blink 182 that everybody knows? What would that sound like in 2022? And that's the ethos that they went behind, right? So, right. I mean, did you kind of have that where you're like, I have to mature this idea, or was it just like, let me just be a catalyst for all the ideas in my head?
You know, to be really honest, you know, the idea came because, you know, it's actually really easy to recycle your own ideas and turn them into something new, you know, and I had a tight deadline with the New York Film Academy. And so I was just kind of like, you know, what was the one thing I did that I really was the most ridiculous thing that I've ever made? Oh, it was Hula Hoop Boy. All right. How could I just full send, just do that again, but like make it a million times crazier and more fun? That's kind of like, it was my own way of like putting a cheat code into the game to like just get a lot of creativity out, you know, because if I tried to like just generate some crazy new original concept at this stage in my storytelling career, I don't know if I would have been able to be honest. It's hard to produce an original, you know, so and Hula Hoop Boy is original, but for me, it's a recreation, a regurgitation. It's a taking of parts and assembling those parts into something new that has a new quality. And then, you know, to kind of just say in terms of how, I guess, how me as a storyteller has, I guess, evolved or, you know, matured over the years. I think really the only thing that's changed when I was younger, everything I made was just jarring, crazy, like just stimulating and way out there. And, you know, it just pushed all these boundaries. And now I'm thinking, why did I do that? Why did I create stuff like that? And I think I just knew at the end of the day that people just want to be entertained. And that was my way of knowing that, like, for sure, if I do these things and edit it right, people will have a reaction. So I think, like, in the back of my head, I know that I have that engine in me that is able to know when something will affect someone a certain way. So I'm trying to take that muscle and I'm trying to apply it, you know, to storytelling that has a little more finesse, a little more subtlety, that works in more of a mainstream, that is able to fit in to people's, you know, content consumption patterns, you know, right, to get the medicine out with the chocolate, you know, and to try to, you know, find streams where my content could fit so that I can, you know, go on this big adventure in a new way. And I think creating Hula Hoop Boy it's also pulling on some of the things I'm really passionate about, which for one is crazy action, wild, weird action comedy, big scenes, you know, people getting hurt, surprising twists in that. You know, I'm really passionate about entertaining through action, through fighting, and keeping it light while also keeping it real, and sort of the tension between those two. I think action comedy is great in that, you know, you could have funny dialogue and a funny setup, but if the fight's done well, all of a sudden you're kind of, oof,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're back in this drama, but then it opens back up into a comedy. You know, obviously Jackie Chan's a master of that. And
Oh yes.
I think, you know, I think our culture, our film universe, I just sense a kind of a desire for some really well done action comedy, you know, some really well choreographed and really well written and really funny. And combining those two, we have great action, we have great comedy, we have some decent action comedies.
Right.
I just don't, nothing stands out in my mind the way that Rush Hour stands out, you know.
I think you're right. I think, but you know, I think people are scared to be creative, right? In this particular instance of time, like the Stanley Kubricks of, you know, and I think that's a mark of an entertainer. And no matter what facet, you know, whether you're an MMA fighter, a pro wrestler, you know, somebody who's a thespian, both, you know, on the page to paper, and you divvy that out to all of these like a cavalcade of artists to make it come into action, right? You know, to actually be, you know, out there in the world, right? But I think people are scared to do that. You know, I think Kevin Hart, or whatever the last Kevin Hart, The Rock, you know, buddy movie or whatever, I think that's the closest we've come. But also they're almost that level of a Kevin Hart, you know, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. It's everything they've touched over the last like 5 years has turned to gold, probably even further than that. That they're almost infallible. It's just like, oh, you know, you're going to get that out of those guys, so let me just go see that. But is it original? You know, like my wife, right before we went on, she just found a movie from the 50s and realized it was basically We Got Mail got adapted from that 1950s movies. There was a lot of it, and it's just like, but I don't think people are willing to expand themselves. But I think also that's why creative filmmakers, you know, with the independent spirit exists, because I don't think you're going to find it. It's like music. You know, you're going to find that cool band in the garage or playing the side stage of a festival that you want to go see a bigger band, but the real change, the real kind of swirl of emotion is happening on the indies, on the outskirts, on the fringes of societal norms.
Right. And so I love that point. And specifically when it comes to fight scenes, you know, in action, it is like composing. It's like composing music. It's like composing a scene, you know, and it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. There's a reason why, you know, when you look at old Hong Kong action, or when you look at Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, Jet Li, some of these guys that like are extremely proficient in martial arts and are able to precisely express that proficiency on screen, and then are surrounded by people who are equal in some degree to that. That's an art. That's like a indie vibe. Now, when we put The Rock and Kevin Hart together, you could put $30 million into a 15-minute sequence with them, you know, blowing up a building, launching off of a roof, dropping down, taking out bad guys, hitting people with helmets and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, those two actors have to be extremely proficient if they want to develop more of this artsy fight scene. They're going to need to learn that martial art. They're going to need to learn those strikes. They're going to need to learn how to fall, how to take those hits. And right. I think realistically, you know, unless your actor has that built in, or unless you're willing to train them, like in Shang-Chi, with the lead actor in that Marvel film.
Right.
So he went through a lot of training to develop and build out his martial art skill set to prepare him for that role. And they really wanted to take the time to make it classical, to make everything feel like this person is part of a lineage of martial artists that goes back hundreds, thousands of years. You know, they really wanted us to feel that. And I loved that. And and that was a super big budget. Now imagine if you can do it with that big, budget, what can you do with a smaller budget that's still, and you can do a lot with a small budget, with action, with fight choreography, because it's so entertaining for so much less. Sometimes it's more entertaining when you have a big wide shot of somebody doing a spinning kick, for example, and then that person that gets kicked gets hit and falls to the ground, and you see them. So you see the full kick, and then you see the person get hit, and then you see the person hit the ground. That required no CGI. It required no wires. It required no cutting, no multiple cameras, just one camera angle. Now that same shot in a more of a modern big blockbuster, scene, they might shoot that a different way. They might cut up close to the actor doing part of the spinning kick. Then they cut to the other actor getting hit. Then they cut to the actor hitting the ground, or from the ground, they would show them hitting the ground. Now that you just had 3 shots, maybe you had to catch more of the scenery. Maybe you had to set up more of the lights. That sequence took 3 times the amount of time, 3 times the amount of money. But I believe that people are sometimes more entertained by just seeing it raw, just by seeing it happening. And that's more of that classical form. And, just because I'm a nerd with this, that kick, that back spinning kick, that's kind of like a more advanced, word in the vocabulary of martial arts, right? So like, you have in the script, he kicks her. All right. Well, that word kick, you could put back spinning kick, side kick, push kick, hook kick, whatever, right? Crescent kick. There's a lot of different kicks that you could insert there. And to know that vocabulary, both as an action, designer and action choreographer, and as an actor, takes the time and the effort to develop that. Same with getting hit. Okay. You get hit. Do you just kind of knock your neck and then follow your knee? Do you launch yourself in the air and do, a flat back? How are you falling? How are you getting hit? And then, how are you getting up? There are certain ways you can get up. There's certain ways you can die. There are all these different vocabulary that's needed to be fluent in to make a really beautiful fight scene in my eyes. And that's, my passion is trying to become more and more proficient, more and more, fluent in the language, so that I can both, do the thing and think about what the thing will look like and direct it or design it.
No, I love it. And funny enough, Micmac actually has a question for you. Let me pull it up. Are you Keanu Reeves' stunt double?
I wish.
I mean, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. I mean,
a dream come true. That's a guy who lives by a lot of what I'm talking about. He's become proficient in the language. Yeah. Decades of training.
Yeah. And also, just how unbothered he is with everything else. He is an artist in its purest form, like an actor, but then does his ability to adapt, right? We knew him as like the guy you see Bill and Ted and everything like that, but there was a point in the 90s where he was just like the love interest guy, right? There was a bunch of films with him like that, right? And then like John Wick is a completely different aspect of him. Obviously, with the Matrix as well. But
Matrix, yeah.
He is he's almost aware, but also not aware. Like if people who have met him, there's just like any regular person on the street, but also the wherewithal that he has, right? Where I think he might have been the first person to do this, but actually maintains the rights to his digital likeness, which I think is like he's already knowing like, oh, the cryptoverse, all this stuff is going on, and I want to own my own, whereas 10 years ago, like owning your own Twitter or social media pages or whatever would have been it. He's like, I want to say like 3 to 5 years ahead by basically, if you're going to use, Keanu Reeves on any type of digital anything, well, you got to ask the man first. And I I love it.
Yeah, well, just on that quick point about owning your digital image, I was a few years ago we were doing Space Jam 2.
Right. Yeah.
I was one of the background actors that's in the stands, that's in the in the big game. And something that they did for all of the background, or most of the background, is they kind of quietly brought us into this trailer. As we got in our full costumes, I was dressed up in this goon outfit with like a mask and a hat and this fake wooden bat, and I was like banging that the whole 3 months of filming. But what they did is they brought me into this trailer, and I stepped into this room with maybe like 300 high definition, like super nice DSLR cameras all around me, surrounding me on all sides, pretty much right up to my feet, like almost right under me, right above me. And they all snapped a super high res image of a quadrant of my body and then stitched it all together to create a 3D rendered image of me. And so what they could do with that image is they could take me and throw me up in the stands, duplicate me somewhere. They could have me walking across, entering the game at some point. They could put me somewhere at a concession stand, getting popcorn. Now, is the technology good enough to where they could zoom in on me and like have me talk? Not yet, but it will be. It will be. And, or maybe it is, and whatever. I'm not aware of it, but that is the future. And Keanu's smart because he knows it.
Let me unmute myself. No, I muted myself. I hear you. No, but that's next level stuff. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just imagining somebody in like the Midwest or whatever, like they see the movie, but not see how, that's an immersive experience within itself. Like, not just act in this movie that is, big budget production, a call to arms to a movie that is so deeply loved that, there's so much affection for the first Space Jam. A lot of it happened, the filming and everything happened during the pandemic, right? And then you yourself are put into this room where, to me, it's unlike any other film, even of like 5 years ago. The processes.
Yeah, filmmaking is changing, just like everything else, like we're talking about with AI. You can do text to code, so you could type into a program that are being developed. I don't know the exact ones. I'm sure you could find some open source stuff out there, but you would type in, sparse desert landscape with setting sun. And then this AI digital designer will create a living, rendered desert for you. It'll be, Unreal Engine vibe, interactable. You could travel through it. It's a full digital landscape based off of the description you use. And it'll be unique every time because the AI is simply doing like what I did when I was trying to come up with a film. I just took from an old idea I had. The AI is doing the exact same thing with the collective intelligence of humanity. It's just pulling from what we've already created and reassembling it into a new thing. So people are, there's new stuff with the Unreal Engine where independent filmmakers are able to create fully immersive 3D universes, characters, and now even there's AI generated voice acting, it'll soon be AI generated actual physical acting with the voice, so it kind of puts into question, what do humans bring to the table that an AI, which is simply regurgitating what we've already made, what's the difference between me having a unique idea and an AI having a unique idea that's pulling from what's already been created? And that sort of becomes an existential question. And what I'm pulling from, maybe something that I'm pulling from is coming from a place, that hasn't yet been tapped into, that I'm now creating from, which is adding something genuinely new to the field of what's been made, and that's the role of the human, in my opinion. We're connected, because the earth is not an isolated event. The earth is connected to the whole cosmos
universe. Yeah. So,
when I'm, what's been created on the earth is also pulling from other places, right? I believe we're able to source our creativity from a field that is not just isolated to what we know or to what we've experienced. It's connected to everything. And, you know, AI is going to be extremely helpful because it's going to reduce a lot of the friction of, you know, because really, is the creativity creating that desert landscape, or is the creativity writing that character who's having the experience in the desert landscape and brings something that people, you know, have a reaction to and have an experience of and connect to? That's, you know, that's really the creative act. The desert landscape, it's honestly like, it's beautiful and great, but if you could just type that in and spend 10 minutes as opposed to 2 months with a team of designers that costs you $500,000, $1 million, that's a, you know, that's a huge, I think that frees up a lot of time and energy for us as filmmakers.
Yeah.
So,
No, 100%, 100%. Speaking of the, you know, the filmmaker kind of portion, apparently Phone Booth made millions of dollars with a little budget.
that was help remind me, Phone Booth, that was like it was like Thriller. He was in the city and
Yeah,
there was like
wasn't it
a
the
terrorist or something.
Colin Farrell, right? When I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yes, that's it. I saw the trailer. I never, like, I confused that with the I guess the Jodie Foster Safe Room,
Oh,
because
yeah.
to me it's like kind of this, like, I'm like, I think of both concepts and I just in my head know that Trapped in a Box happens in my
Right.
head. Yeah,
Right. Both were right. And more, the other one was more of like it was a wide box because like he had to, I think in Phone Booth, like he had to, you know, if he hung up, there was things at stake. He couldn't hang up. You know, he was locked in. Yeah, you know, I don't remember exactly that film and its budget, but I do remember it was successful. And you know, if they just shot it on a studio lot with this one little spot with the phone, and then, you know, they didn't need much to make people get anxious and, you know, make it a thriller. Yeah.
yeah. And I guess in the theme of, you know, small budgets making crap tons of money, Saw One, $1 million, and it was 110 million return. Which I'm
Wow.
Mick Mac. I didn't know you were a movie buff.
Nick
Good
Mack
job,
coming
sir.
in with the wisdom here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dropping those stats.
Well, not just stats. He also has opinions because he believes that Point Break is Keanu at his best.
Copy that.
Yeah, there you go. Um, well, one way, right? Obviously, we talked about your kind of your experience as a writer, right? But that's not your only expression of your art, because actually at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you're going to be doing martial arts. You're taking classes. So, with that all being said, how have you kind of expanded yourself in your creativity? You know, and obviously you mentioned all of these great kind of inspirations, the Jackie Chan films of old and Rush Hour, but now you have a way of actually articulating that through your body with all the other stuff that you have, your spiritual self, your physical self, and you're just adding another attribute to it. So how did you kind of get involved with stunt work?
Yeah. So my first stunt classes were out here in LA. You know, before moving out here, martial arts was just something I copied. You know, it's just something I was that kid who pretended to do Dragon Ball Z. I would recreate Dragon Ball Z fights in my living room with my friends. You know, that was us. You know, so yeah, I never grew up doing martial arts. I don't have a long background in it. So really my training has been as an actor, you know, and really I think more just with respect to the stunt community, I'm more of an action actor, you know, stuntman. You know, if you had me being set on fire, being thrown down a stairs, being hit by a car, these are things that I would not do. Those are things that I would have a stunt double do. So really, I'm an action actor who can do most of his stunts, but not all of them. You know, and most of those stunts would be fight involved, falling, getting hit, hitting, you know, and helping to be a part of the choreography. So my training has been with some various studios, various teachers. Recently, I've linked up with Stunts in Motion, Jack Wang. I study with him out in Hollywood and out east. We have two locations, and he's, you know, his class is like a buffet. You know, you're learning everything from the classical tradition of Wing Chun Tai Chi, and then he's influenced, his teacher was within the Bruce Lee lineage. So he brings in JKD, and we learn, the MMA side of things, that this incredible hybridization of kickboxing and Wing Chun that Bruce Lee kind of brought. And so we learn the creative act of that, Taekwondo, karate, and then we plug in a lot of that classical foundation in our work with weapons. So, that you can apply different forms, different ancient forms to an English longsword. You can, the way you block something and your stance in that can be influenced by Tai Chi, and you can start blending the worlds, with the bow staff. Like there's a certain way that the way you lean into a strike and then pull back, that's like kind of a Wing Chun movement where you're blocking real quick with your elbow. There's just different ways that things can merge. And so my teacher, Mr. Wang, has really ingrained that perspective, and he's really brought a creative edge to my relationship with martial arts. And so he's really sparked a lot of my confidence in my ability to design action, because, you can't design an action scene if you don't have some degree of fluent, if you're not to some degree fluent in martial arts, either literally just conceptually, but I would say you got to kind of know it, because it's really moment to moment. It's, someone punches, okay, now we need this actress to block. All right, maybe is she going to block with her elbow? Okay, if she doesn't, if you're going to do that properly, you kind of have to block like this. Oh, and now look at her stance. She's vulnerable there. So now, sir, I need you to come in with the the body shot. Okay, now she's going to come in. So it's like you kind of, in the moment, you have to pull from your knowledge and your experience to design the action. So as you can tell, I'm kind of nerdy about it. I love it. I'm learning. I'm definitely a student. I have a lot of respect for the people who have been doing this 15 years before me. My teacher's been doing this since he was in his 20s. He's 50 something now. So, he studied all over the world, Japan, some of the famous stunt teams out there, and, has been in these circles. He's really influenced by Hong Kong action. So I am as well. And I think that's the kind of flair I want to bring to action comedy, is more of this Hong Kong, style.
We need more of it. I mean, that strikes an affinity to so many people. And I know there's people within, MMA, the sport, that, they saw, a Chow Yun-fat film from 1970 some odd, or a Bruce Lee film specifically, and even the younger ones, influenced by Jackie Chan and what have you. But we don't have so much of that anymore. It was like 1997, I feel like was, we were kind of, a couple decades removed, or a decade and a half removed from, Bruce Lee and the unfortunate passing of Brandon Lee, his son, whatever. But there was enough time for it to breathe and kind of be rediscovered by a new generation. And I remember watching like Rumble in the Bronx and just knowing like what a human could do. And it was, and then Jackie Chan's outtakes that he broke his foot in the middle of filming, and they had like a polyurethane, shoe over his cast and whatever, and he was still doing the stunts. And it's just, we need more of that. So if you're the purveyor of it, please, Josh, come on, bring us back.
And I feel so privileged, because now, a lot of the things that would lead Jackie Chan to get hurt, we've learned from, we would probably prevent, or just, not, because now, you just have to be safe, and you just can't afford to have your actor break their leg, because it derails the entire show. So you need to, so I feel really lucky that like there's been so much development in this, and, and a lot of the action that you're seeing now, for example, out of 8711, they're just coming out, they've designed, and I think they produced Violent Night. This is the same group and director, Chad Stiletzky, behind the John Wick, that same kind of stunt group with Atomic Blonde, and some of these really well choreographed fight, action movies. They're doing some amazing stuff that is, giving us these wide angles, letting us see when people get thrown into stuff, really good, clean, fast paced, multi-move, fight scenes where people really are loving that. And I think it's obvious from their success. So they're kind of paving the way. And for me, I'm just, I'm just a student, I'm learning, and then I try to find my lane. You know, what's my lane, and how can I add value? How can I add something new and novel, and something that, you know, contributes to the space? You know, that's kind of the creative challenge. Because now, if I just wanted to kind of, if I rewinded 10 years, you know, they kind of caught that wave, and now they're producing some of the action that now is sort of almost mainstream. So then people are going to kind of set that as their bar for, like, oh, this is kind of how a good action scene needs to look now. Okay, so how am I going to add my little thing to that bar? How am I going to squeeze in my little perspective into that larger creative challenge? You know, and I do think comedy is sort of my little way of flavoring it up a bit. And hopefully what I continue to learn with my teacher and some of the things we're doing, you know, with the classical forms, kind of this more of a Shakespeare of action, you know, maybe people would like some more Shakespeare, some more classical stuff, you know, with a modern twist, with all the special effects and everything that we have now.
I love it. I mean, I think any art form is best when there's so many contributors to the given genre and pulling from so many different experiences. So I'm all for it, 100%. Let's do this. And Micmac says it's the storytelling, not always the special effects and stuff. You can have the best, the best investment, but the storytelling can be garbage at some points. So the big budgets doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the most authentic action scenes ever.
Right. Stories reflect life, you know. Good stories, they reflect like reality. They reflect some aspect of life that you can connect to and experience as real in that moment, right? You know, and so, like, you know, if you have all the CGI and all the stuff going on and the story's bad, then none of it is real. None of it is, you can't connect to it. It doesn't mean anything. But a good story, it means something because, yeah, it's pulling from something that exists, that is real, that is now being replicated and recreated for you to connect with and have an experience of again. And you know, so it's like he was saying, like, you could have a really great story and crazy weird special effects and all this crazy stuff happening. And if the story's good, you're bought in no matter what's happening. You know, it's like everything everywhere all at once.
Yes.
Everything was happening that was so far-fetched and so far out, and yet it was so relatable. It was so human. It was so, like, connected to life in this crazy way. You know, it was the most far out movie ever, and it was also the most intimate, right? You, yourself, and I, and your loved ones, and it was so close to something that so many of us could touch, and I think that's why it was so successful.
No, 1,000%. And I guess to the Dragon Ball Z tip, Micmac says, Gohan rules.
Go on. Gosh, he has a soft spot in my heart.
There you go. Also, on the other side of the spectrum, Battlefield Earth cost $73 million and made $29 million return. There's, yes, there. I mean, I guess they made L. Ron Hubbard proud. 10 points for them. Yeah. No, man. I thoroughly enjoyed this because, like, I don't even know how to broach the subject, but also, like, the medicine stuff. I don't know how deep you wanted to get into it, but, like, you are the perfect person to kind of integrate these thoughts, ideas, and medicines and what they're used for, and I think the love behind it, and what it can mean for people. So, like, how did you get into, like, just nature's medicine?
So the word medicine, right? What does that mean? Just to help frame kind of this share, you know, for me, medicine, you know, you are medicine, your expression, yourself, in your pure form, like in your true expression, is medicine, because, you know, it is like a tuning fork. It's like a sound that you can resonate with. And then when two people are in their medicine, so to speak, they're both uplifted and strengthened in that. So for me, medicine work, or being, you know, working with medicine or expressing my medicine, is about expressing my true vibration, my true self, and then letting that be a tuning fork for other people to be able to have permission or to be excited to match and to express their true selves. And I think that, you know, for me is a purpose that I try to live by. And, you know, my journey with that has been really like the root of it was really having challenge with that. When I was really young, it was actually really hard for me to be a person. It was challenging to be in my body. I had twitches. I had these strange tics and things that I would experience uncontrollably, where I would shake, I would make loud noises. I would kind of have these little things with my throat. I would squint my eyes. I would shake my hand. I would clench my my abdomen, and you know, this was a big part of my childhood. And at a certain point, it was excruciating, and it was unbearable, and it became kind of a problem. We weren't actually sure if we could travel. There were some kind of questions about what this is, if I need to see, like, we had seen specialists, but like we weren't sure if I needed to like kind of escalate that and seek care. So it was really serious. And I say all this to say, you know, that's an experience of me not experiencing the medicine of myself. Because what was really happening was that for whatever reason, it was really hard for me to relax. It was really hard for me after the activity of the day as a young little boy. All that activity stops, and then you're left with stillness. You're left with silence. You're left with just being alive, just life. That's it. Now, I was very uncomfortable in that. For whatever reason, I'm not really sure why it was so uncomfortable, but I had coping mechanisms to get out of that. And one of, you know, my coping mechanisms were these twitches. They were like stimulation.
Wow.
So the way I would re-stimulate myself to kind of get the wheel going again and get my nervous system to get back into where it's comfortable, which is stimulation. My nervous system, for whatever reason, wasn't comfortable with stillness. So it took me time and support and love for me to be able to relax and come back to a place of stillness. And this is, I'm sharing this just to share that what was really my greatest challenge became something that is my medicine, because now I actually am able to sit in that stillness and conjure it up freely. You know, I'm able to experience myself and my stillness to a degree that I feel is medicinal, and that I can emanate and sort of, you know, share. And I hope and I pray that, you know, that medicine gets to continue to grow in me, and that my experience of my natural state, my experience of my essence and the stillness of life can be something that grows to blossom as I open up, you know, as I continue to express myself in this world. I want it to be anchored in that place that was my first pain, you know, my first challenge was just being a human. So if I can be really just fine with being a human, I feel like that's a unique perspective in this weird way that I have, because I had the experience of it not being easy.
Right.
So I have both, and I can hold the two, and I can work with the two, and I can notice when something is starting to edge me. In fact, when I have like moments of pressure, or if I'm kind of dealing with a lot, I'll notice my right hand starts twitching.
Really?
And so it's like a barometer, and I'm like, oh, it's like a little engine light, you know. It's like, oh, looks like I got to edge off the RPM here, you know. Looks like I got to cool down. Looks like I got to, you know, check on my oil, you know. How am I doing? So yeah, tending to myself has been part of the practice of medicine work, you know, learning how to take care of my of myself, and then, you know, through that journey, then being able to carry that information, that embodied experience outward. If someone asks, you know, I can share my experience.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It makes you relatable, you know, even though, you know, somebody going through a, you know, a tedious strife in life, right? but you having that experience and showing like, hey, I'm on the other side of it, but it's still there. But I've been able to turn this into my superpower to, the terminology of self-care, right? That's something that kind of permeates the lexicon nowadays, but it's something that is so important, and generations prior to us didn't necessarily, kind of take it on, like, the concept, the ability to take care of yourself. You medicate with whatever the guy coming home from work and drinking a beer and whatever, those coping mechanisms, rather than kind of reflect inside yourself and go like, hey, and all of these things, right? And I think it's I think it's kind of poetic, right? Because going to all of these specialists and going through it as a young child, right? And kids are mean, right? So you're probably getting bullied and teased and all of that, and all of this is happening. But then somewhere you kind of develop the insight, whether that be you yourself looking internally, or the things around you also looking at you and trying to diagnose the best you can with what you have at your disposal. And you kind of figure out a way where, I mean, here, like prior to you telling me this, I wouldn't have known at all, but it's still there telling you when to, take the gas, foot off the gas. Like most people don't have that. They'll RPM it and whatever, and then end up burning out and wonder what happened there. So you've literally taken your negative kind of, whether it be quirk or what have you, and I don't say negative because it's all beautiful, but also what happened, right? What happened, right? Nobody wants to go through that, right? But it brought something beautiful. It elicited something from you. It's almost like a lotus flower. It kind of died, but then it sprouted off life, in the murkiest of situations, right? And now you stand this amazing person with and is receptive to all the things around you. I just think it's great. I think it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I'm sorry that you went through it, but also, man, what you've been able to do since those formative years. My goodness, like you got to be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you, dude.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. There was a moment I remember when I was young. I sat on the end of my bed, and I just looked at my hand, and it would always do the thing. I always twitch. But then when I looked at it and I felt it, there was this weird thing where it's like, it was like this like cat that I had to like lock eyes with. Yeah. And the moment I disconnected from it, it just started going crazy and started like swatting at everything and, tearing up the furniture. So I had to like come into contact with myself. And myself in that moment was sort of the feeling experience of my hand. And so in a way I've had to like tame my cat, my inner cat. I've had to, and the way I did that wasn't through catnip. It wasn't through, slapping it on the butt and making it do stuff. It was, it was developing a relationship, and I think what you're talking about with the way that humanity has come up to this point, which there's good and bad, but part of the bad is that we've been in a unconscious relationship with ourselves.
Yes.
The journey to self-care is the journey of establishing a healthy relationship with yourself. It's not about what you do. What you do is going to be a reflection of how you're relating. The actions are just the fruit of your relationship, but the quality of that relationship and quality could be determined by compassion, care, kindness, presence, listening, openness, enthusiasm, encouragement. Those are all high value, high quality aspects of that relationship that I would say leads to the actions, which are self-care, So, but if you're not thinking about it in terms of relationship and you're only thinking about it in terms of what do I do, you're kind of trying to like hack the whole thing. And there's something in us that knows you're just trying to skirt around this. You don't really love me right now. You're just trying to fix me. You're just trying to fix your twitch, but what I need is someone to connect with me. What I need is someone to love me and to hear me and to see me, And it's a weird thing where we live in ourselves and we
Mm-hmm.
have this like, it's like, you know, we're like almost two separate people. It's our mind and ourself. And so you're trying to like merge it so that your mind
Right.
and yourself kind of get more one, you know, where there's a cohesiveness between how you think and who you are, kind of. I know that's getting kind of out there, but
No, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of likened it to a career in combat sports, right? Where, you know, whether it be a fighter, pro wrestler, you know, when you hit your stride, it's almost it's in. There's no definition of when this happens, but the right amount of experience versus the lack of damage on your body, right? And sometimes they don't always meet. Sometimes you're a black belt and everything and whatever, but you've been in so many wars that you can't, you know, execute what your mind is telling your body to do, right? And then if you're a young gun, you know, guns ablazing and whatever, and you're knocking everybody out and whatever, you know, don't know jujitsu, but you have the presence of your body to kind of figure it out and even like fall into submissions and whatever. That has happened too. You almost become a prodigy of sorts. But then when you end up losing, right, a downfall happens, you start questioning the whole thing because it's something that came natural. But this loss, you know, whether that be a weight miss or whatever, an injury or whatever, you're not familiar with that loss and you're not reflecting on it, right? So I feel
yeah.
like it's this definite but non-definite kind of prism, right? Where you the right amount of experience and the right amount of self body care, what have you, and when those two meet, and it doesn't meet for long. You know, it might be one fight where you look like an absolute world beater, and then the next time you win the title, you do the thing or whatever, and the next fight you look like a completely different person because that that window was very finite. You know, like, and that to me is it. You know, where you're kind of looking at yourself and like internalizing, and that the practice of actually looking at yourself and going like, hey, I know what this is, and starting to begin to understand. And you know, when you're faced with situations like that where you're up against a deadline or this thing, you get a writer's block, you want to emit this to the world, you want to show yourself or whatever, but then the creativity sometimes stops, right? And it's just like very, like I said, it's a definite but indefinable kind of point in your life, the journey, what have you, that you get it when it's good, but then when it's off, sometimes it never returns.
Yep. And that, right. And that relationship or that connection, intimacy, really, that you develop internally, it sets like a bar or like a baseline for when you fall, you're falling on top of that bedrock. You're falling on top of that maybe cushion even, because you know that somewhere there is a self or there is a presence that's encouraging and that's lifting you up from that fall. If you do not have a connection with yourself and you fall and you're not practiced in treating yourself right, you're not practiced in self-care like we're talking about, or there's just not an awareness that no matter what, no matter who does or doesn't support me, I will. You know, if there's not that degree of safety there, it's a lot harder to get back up and to risk everything again. If you aren't really sure, you know, if there's going to be a soft landing on the really fundamental level psychologically, you know, or even just, you know, on a nervous system level. Like I really relate to this, a lot of this on a nervous system level. Like, how do our nervous systems feel in ourselves? You know, how does it feel when you're, you know, at the end of the day, when you're sitting on the couch? How does it feel to be you? How does it feel? What is that like? Do you enjoy it? Do you know? Have you ever tried to feel and to articulate what it feels like? You know, is it uncomfortable that like it was for me when I was a kid? And sometimes even still, if I'm losing touch with my practices, am I uncomfortable being me right now? Why? What is that? Is this something I can do anything about? Or is it just more of a call for connection? Is it more of a invitation to develop a new layer of intimacy and connection with myself? You know, and these, I guess these are all the themes that when we were chatting offline, you know, these are the themes that I explore in my quest, you know, to become the medicine, or to share the medicine, or to, you know, bake it in my little oven called me, you know, and put it on the table. Yeah, these are the things that I think about.
No, I'm so grateful that, you know, we were able to meet. I'm grateful for your life condition and the fact that you exist. But, you know, to get to where you are, there had to be a lot of people to kind of help you get to this place, this sense of community and whatever. You know, they say it takes a village to raise one, right? So let's shout out some of your village. You know, so take as long as you need. Let's get some shout outs out of the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, shout out to my family, the Mesniks. Shout out to Grandma Sue. I know you're out there listening. And my cousins, Felicity and Anson, all the people who have been there from day one. Shout out to FSU. Shout out to my squad, Go Knowles. All the people from Mammoth that I lived with and we all created with. Shout out to everybody there. And then shout out to Stunts in Motion, the stunt team, Jack Wang, all the people there who practice long hours in the smelly Hollywood gym. Thanks for being there. Thanks for being a part of it and teaching me everything. And, you know, shout out to my circle, people who I trust and who I receive mentorship and guidance from. And Suzanne, who I mentioned earlier, shout out to you. And gosh, who did I leave out? You know, shout out to God, you know, shout out to the everything and the all that's coming through my radio and that comes through my chocolate bar and that comes through my meditations and through church and through everything, you know. Shout out to Spirit. So that's my offering of gratitude. It's so great to connect with you, Adam, and to share this space with you, and, you know, to come on and reflect and express. Yeah, man, I've really enjoyed this.
I think you're going to move mountains with what you, again, everything that you've experienced and where your heart is, you know. I think when it's all said and done, I think you're going to be pretty proud of the work that you've done. So I just thank you for being here. And I also like to thank you guys for joining us here at According to Woods. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Also on bodyslam.net and all of their social media pages. Go ahead and give them a sub. I mean, Josh, you're subscribed to the According to Woods podcast, aren't you?
Yes.
Dang right. So be like Josh.
Right. Be like me.
So be like him, right? And expound this higher sense of self that you've gotten from this very episode, because I know I have. But if you don't believe me, you don't believe Josh, and I don't know why you don't. Well, here's somebody that Josh and I both know to help convince you.
Hey, this is Zeta Zhang. Make sure you subscribe to According to